So NIO CEO recently did this interview, and this was right after the IAA event in Germany. And it was a content creator here in China that interviewed him, and it was a 15 minute long interview. And he offered lots of interesting updates worth taking note. And the interviewer was Che Yun. So if you guys know Chinese, you guys can go check him out as well. So they first talked about the whole entire IA event, and he talked about how it's so impressive that it's pretty much 50-50 in terms of Chinese companies and German companies all being there, and also a lot of suppliers being there as well, and further strengthening cooperation and strategic investment between China and Europe. And he also was really impressed with how all these CEOs were there as well, not just for the German companies, but also for a lot of the Chinese companies there as well. And he said, and I quote, "China and Europe in terms of cooperation far exceeds competition." A lot of people, especially the EU Parliament, thinks that China is a great competitor and it's going to undercut Germans. But in his aspect, there's greater chance of cooperation, and that exceeds competition. And he talked about how before people would look at China individually as its own separate market, but now they look at China for China's intelligence, its smart EV capabilities, and R&D capabilities, and that the Germans see this as a necessity and opportunity. I'm thinking Germans, well, is he referring to Germans in general, or is he referring to Mercedes? And he talked about even though the competition is tough, in the long run, it will benefit consumer. And he said as long as there's openness, right? There's openness, and competition will greatly benefit the industry, push the industry forward, and benefit consumers in general. And that's the thing. You can't just say we're not going to let this brand come into our country because we don't want them to get ahead. That's stupid. That's sort of how the West thinks about things right now. You know, banning Huawei and all that kind of shabam. He talked about how China has many generations of engineers, and the only way to innovate is to push things forward and not restrict things. He talked about the European side of things. So he talked about how as early as 2015, they had the design center and R&D center in Europe as well. Design center in Germany, R&D center in the UK. So for a while, NIO has always had, the roots in Europe, but they only officially entered the EU market about 2 years ago. And he said it is a difficult road for consumers to spend a lot of money to buy a Chinese car. There still needs to be more time and take it a step at a time. Yes, it's there's people still have to get over the stereotype of made in China equals bad. But as people slowly realize the brand NIO and understand it more and more, test out the vehicle, more solid good reviews for NIO come out, then people realize that NIO is the exception. NIO is excellent quality and not bad quality. For people to understand that, it still takes some time. And then the interviewer asked a very interesting question: did you make any sort of adjustments for the European market? And he said there's lots of touring cars in Europe, like the BMW 3 Series Touring and 5 Series Touring, which are more popular than the sedans. And he noticed that when he went on a European driving trip, him and the co-founder, back when NIO Berlin was going to launch. So he talks about how European OEMs, when they enter the China market, they also make adjustments. So is NIO, and NIO is specifically made that touring car for the European market. But he said that they still need to further understand and learn the European consumer needs. And right now he talked about how there's about 1,000 employees in Europe, and he talked about not essentially expanding that, which is the interesting point. But he said the focus is smoothing operations and efficiency. So that's pretty interesting. So yes, they do need to work things out and basically make things better with the existing staff they have. And then they talked about how they achieved 20,000 deliveries, which was a very big achievement for July. He talked about how for that month they had 59% market share, and that delivery number was no easy task. He talked about how the product has completely transitioned from NT1 to NT 2.0 platform. And he talked about how NIO can't be like Tesla, only upgrading a vehicle model after like 6 years. And he talked about how some in China upgrade the vehicle model every year. And he said for us, this year they introduced 5 new cars to the market, brought 5 new cars to the market. So this was actually a huge achievement for them. And delivery efficiency has drastically improved, and it was a huge challenge for the entire team. That is correct. I mean, like, they launched the EC6 basically right after the launch event. They got deliveries on the exact same day, which is amazing. Also for the ES6 and all those other vehicles, it's pretty amazing what they're able to do now, launching and delivering vehicles as soon as they launch them, which is very impressive. But he talked about how the company still hasn't adapted to all of a sudden selling 8 cars, because they have 8 cars. I mean, like, there's so many cars you can't even fit all of them in the stores or showrooms. All right, the service center, it's a massive place, but they can only fit 7 cars. I don't know if you noticed this, but the car missing was the ET5 sedan. Of course, they got the test drive car out there, but it's just a massive fleet. And sometimes you can't get the customer to test drive the car they want to, because it's just so many cars. And then he talked about how before there wasn't as much competition, and before NIO was the natural choice for a high-end luxury EV, but now there's many great luxury EVs. So he said the real challenge right now is how they can effectively communicate their advantages and services. And before, they took a more passive approach, but now he said we need to do better and actively elaborate our strengths. For example, not comparing. That's one of the problems I highlighted. But now they're telling sales reps to actually tell customers that NIO has the biggest market share. And he said that there's still a lot of misunderstanding. For example, people all say services are good for NIO, but he said we put a lot of effort in our R&D. Yeah, they spend a lot on R&D. We spend a lot of work on the things you can't see, and our overall tech is about 1 or 2 in the industry. Number 1 or number 2. Yeah, that's also correct. A lot of times people spend money. Other competitors spend money on things that you can touch and see. For example, the comfortable seats and screens and all that kind of flashy stuff, leather everywhere. But then the actual car might not be that high quality. But NIO's, it's the opposite. They work really hard to make sure the car is the safest, and also just high quality materials all over the place. He talked about how they achieved a lot of achievement, golden steering wheel, and also he said when the new NCAP regulations came out, and new NCAP regulations really penalized a car being over stiff, so that would actually in essence be bad for NIO. But all the other companies took a more let's wait and see approach. Well, NIO was like, let's be the first one to do it. So they did not hesitate to put their car up for the test, and of course they got 5-star throughout the test. And next up, very important sales target, 30K deliveries. They talked about this, and he said we need to first achieve the sales force with the potential capacity of 30K. However, much of that will still depend on overall sales effectiveness. Of course, we want more and more. And he talked about how if the sales force, if they work really hard and they're at full capacity, of course they can get 30K deliveries with the amount of sales staff and all that kind of stuff. But if the sales staff isn't effective and all that kind of stuff, and they're only using 60% of their potential, then you might only get 60% of those numbers. You might only get like 18K or something like that. So that was one of the emphasis that he said. The capacity for 30K needs to be achieved first. I think we can get to 30K for October, probably, because of the EC6 numbers. And for September, actually, we're going to get a big boost as well from EC6 deliveries. Very nice. Next, he talked about NIO Phone. And he mentioned how this is just a high-end flagship. The identity will be distinctively NIO. but will be the first phone in the world to be designed specifically for the car, which has never been done before. And leaking some info, this is what he said, leaking some info, there'll be groundbreaking innovations. That's what he said. It is a phone designed for NIO owner. For non-NIO owners, it will still be a very good flagship phone, but the priority will be for NIO owners. And he said, but temper your expectations. Don't expect way too much from the first phone. The main priority is to actually ensure that there's good battery life, smoothness, responsiveness, and he said that they will not have ads on the phone for sure. And of course, they can optimize everything to better suit the needs of integration with the car. And he said that some of the features that it will be able to do with the car will still need some time. There are already a lot of features that are going to be released at launch, but there will be more coming in the future. But he said he is satisfied for now with the feature set, and he wants to take things one step at a time. And he said because a car is so much more expensive, it is worth it to have the car be at the center of the design process of the phone. And he said that NIO owners can use some NIO points when purchasing the phone, which is very nice. And then he said for Subbrand, he very quickly glanced over Subbrand. He also said that Alps will be just Alps, and he said even though the code name is Alps, the actual final Subbrand name might not be Alps. All right, he's pretty much telling us that straight up. But he said the Alps will be for a normal family, while the NIO, it's more for those high-end business, family, etc. And he said that the Subbrand will share some supply chain, but overall 2 different markets. And also we got the leak that NIO might be pursuing dealership models for the Subbrand, which was a very smart choice, I think, because it's unfeasible for them to open up stores, more stores to just showcase the Subbrand. That would be a pretty dumb move and a big burden on shareholders. So it would make sense for them to just have dealerships, but that can also hinder sales as well. What if the dealership model doesn't pick up? So we'll have to see. It's probably a mixture of 2 big cities, direct to consumers, smaller tier cities, dealerships. But cool, this is the wrap up of what the CEO said. Very, very interesting. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.